MSNBC.
Hardball with Chris Matthews, tonight at 7 on MSNBC.
The place for politics.
All right, well, welcome back. Washington yesterday pretending to deal with too big to fail for the cameras. They did nothing to actually take away a bank's ability to take infinite risk with taxpayer money, which by definition is too big to fail. But they did have a lot of theater. Two of the big power players testifying on the Hill about the rules that they say they would like to institute to get rid of too big to fail. Of course, none of those actually involve ceasing banks from using your tax money to gamble wildly until they're drunk, but they do create a new way to bail the banks out. One version, the White House and the regulators seem to be butting heads with some of their other regulators about was how to do it. Case in point, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner and FDIC Chairwoman Sheila Bair, both testifying before the House Financial Services Committee Thursday, both agreed that the taxpayer should never have to fund another bank bailout. Neither said that they would actually create rules for banks to prevent them from exploiting their infinite subsidy from the taxpayer to force us to bail them out. Funny, right? Anyway, on the issue of who should pay and when, there's a clear difference of opinion. First, Secretary Geithner, who says let the banks steal all the money and blow up, and then let those who survive the theft be the first to pay. Take a listen.
The government should have the authority to recoup any losses by assessing a fee on other financial institutions. These assessments should be stretched out over time as necessary to avoid adding to the pressures you face in crisis.
So let's be clear, that is the Treasury Secretary. The Treasury is where the entire wealth of the future of our nation is warehoused. The Treasury Secretary is the custodian of the future wealth of America. The Treasury Secretary is saying, don't restrict banks from taking outrageous risk with taxpayer money, simply create a new penalty for them after they've enriched themselves and engorged themselves in the casino so that some of the casino players, the banks, have to help out. Interesting representation we have at the Treasury. Now listen to Sheila Bair, who says, why would you wait to find the banks to pay the price for their bad behavior? Sheila says, get in there early.
We believe a pre-funded reserve has significant advantages over an ex-post fund.
Now, we know Bair's not afraid to speak her mind. After all, she did join the protesters at this week's ABA meeting in Chicago. Take a listen to that.
I hope we see other measures taken that will create a more resilient, transparent, and better regulated financial system, including an end to the too big to fail doctrine. Yes. Yes. No more bailouts. No more bailouts.
Well, will the White House listen to the chair of the FDIC, who again represents all of the bank deposits of all the literally widows, orphans, and working individuals in this country? She's responsible for being the custodian of that wealth. Meanwhile, our politicians in 2000 took the most secure assets that we had as a country and legalized a gigantic gambling casino opened in 2000 in the derivatives market with those assets. Well, again, if you look back and forth to the conflict between Bair and Geithner, Geithner has tended to win those policy debates, which is why I think there's so much frustration in this country. Joining us, Michael Greenberger, former director at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission between 1997 and 1999, and a man who understands the inherent problem in banks that control government using taxpayers to subsidize their casino. And then Henry Blodgett, CEO and editor-in-chief of the Business Insider. Mr. Blodgett, nice to see you. Professor Greenberger, why are the banks of this country allowed to take infinite risk with taxpayer money and no one else is allowed that privilege? Because I would love that opportunity.
Well, it all begins with the TARP legislation passed in October of 2008, which essentially turned the money over to the banks without any conditions at all. No conditions to lend to people who need money in the markets, no conditions on using that taxpayer money to take extreme risk, and taking extreme risk with the great comfort that if they fail, it will be you and me and the rest of the American taxpayers who bail them out.
We get it. I guess, Professor, what I'm trying to figure out is Why is it legal? I mean, literally, this is so absurd. I walk around, whether I'm talking to billionaires and entrepreneurs who are phenomenally frustrated and alarmed. They're concerned. They can't believe that this is happening. To the man that I buy my falafel from when I'm at lunch has the same concern. Why is it legal? Why is it of law? Go back to Jefferson and Hamilton here. Why is it legal for the U.S. banking system to take infinite risk in a financial gambling parlor in secret, and use taxpayer assets? In other words, if I want to go gambling in Las Vegas, I can't take the taxpayers' money, and yet the banks are using the taxpayers' money for the largest gambling casino in the history of the world.
Well, I think Senator Dick Durbin, upon finding that several Democrats switched their votes to fight bankruptcy judges adjusting mortgages to keep people in their house, walked out of the meeting when he realized he lost his own caucus and said, the banks run this place. Colin Peterson, the chairman of the Ag Committee, facing similar frustration, said, the banks run this place. Those are their words. There are 5 banking lobbyists for every member of Congress. I work with a lot of unions, consumer groups, environmental groups. We're essentially operating or advocating for the taxpayer as a pro bono operation. Right. It's a one-sided system. I was a litigator for 25 years. You would never have an argument in front of a judge with only one side making the argument. It would be an adversarial system. Yeah. Essentially, the banks and the powerful corporations in Congress today are the only people who can afford the ear of Congress, so they get what they want. What we're getting is general rules that sound good that are eaten away by small exceptions. The laws, as I see it, will be more favorable to this casino-like atmosphere if the pending legislation is passed than they were on September 14th, 2008, when many of us were complaining about the lax laws leading to the meltdown.
Henry Blodgett, it's as if they are using the crisis to try to liberalize the casino to steal more taxpayer money.
That's certainly what's happened. And you listen to them. First of all, thank goodness for Sheila Bair. At least we have a strong voice.
And Elizabeth Warren, I would add to that
Absolutely.
list.
And at least that's creating some
And Neil Barofsky. We have a few people in that government who get what we're talking about and are working on behalf of the American people against bank interest in our Congress.
Absolutely. The big issue is too big to fail. You have to destroy that. There are only 2 ways to do it. You break up the banks, which I think is impractical, creates a lot of problems.
Greenspan has suggested that. Mervyn King has said this sort of thing,
Still creates a lot of problems.
But very hard
How
to
big,
do.
globally,
Too complex to resolve all this nonsense.
Right. And then the other is that you create a way for banks to fail without taking the entire system down. Then if they want to gamble themselves into oblivion, it's fine. It won't kill the rest of us.
But Henry, as long as proprietary trading, so in other words, if I wanted to go out and take my $1 million to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and be Mr. Big Guy, I'm going to buy some stock, sell, I could only go to my $1 million. I can't go to $100 million because I don't have $100 million. The only people in the world, the only group in the world that can do that is the bank. And that is because they changed the laws to allow the banks to take infinite risk with taxpayer money, where they take the upside and we take the downside. And I don't understand why they won't deal. I don't get it.
That piece of it is outrageous. The biggest mistake was the concept that you had to protect the folks who lent the money to the banks 100 cents on the dollar. No risk. It's just government debt to Citigroup to blow up for you. But you can change that. You can change financial bankruptcy law so that if a bank gets in trouble, you convert that debt to equity. Suddenly you've taken care of the capital problem. If you say this in advance, you make it very clear that this is what you're going to do.
What if you make it illegal to take taxpayer money to the casino? Why don't they just close? Professor Greenberg, I got to wrap this up. But I understand, as long as we have a casino, you will not have investment in America. If you legalize a casino, it's more fun to go to the casino than it is to invest. You get more girls, you make more money, you get a faster car. But you deprive America of investment, period, for everything from a cure for cancer to a trip to Mars to free energy.
Dylan, I think you hit it on nail on the head. What we have become expert in is betting. We can't cure cancer. We can't cure AIDS. Our manufacturing process is in disarray. If we ever got involved in a serious war, we would have no industrial base to fight it. What is paramount in the eyes of those who have power is continuing to have swaps, write paper, non-productive betting. And until we put an end to that, we are going to be a banana republic.
Yeah, a casino culture has taken over this country, Henry. People say, oh, are you worried? No. You got your vote. You have the money we spend after taxes, and we have a free press. This is not Russia. This is not a banana republic, even though it may feel like it sometimes, because we have the privileges afforded us in the Constitution. Henry, a pleasure to see you. Professor, thank you. Have a happy Halloween.
Welcome. Thank you, sir. You too.
I'm trying to figure out my costume. What do you think I should go with?
Go as anything. Go as Tim Geithner.
I could go as the Treasury Secretary. Make sure to tune in to NBC's Meet the Press this Sunday. Moderator David Gregory will have an exclusive interview with the Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner. Tim Geithner, remember, is the one who walked into the room and decided to give taxpayer money through AIG by the tens of billions to every bank that had done business with them. 100 cents on the dollar. Taxpayer money. The banks had agreed to 40 cents. And then the Treasury Secretary changed it to 100 cents. Why? Again, the Treasury Secretary with David Gregory. This weekend, we're back at the morning meeting right after this.